All right. Sharon, you set that up. Good. Thank you. So Steve, the only problem with that view is we get to see your nose hair. That fixed it.
How's that?
That's way better.
There.
That's funny. All right, let's get started. Well, hey, welcome everybody to Java with Jim. The people are on vacation edition, so we're trimming the crowd a little bit, but I suspect that's why people are out and about. I'll actually be doing this from the Jersey Shore next week, so I'll be joining you there.
Whereabouts?
Long Beach Island. We have a house there.
Oh, nice.
Surf City.
Yep.
But not the California one that the Beach Boys talk about. It's the other one. So today we've been talking about pivot, and we thought it'd be interesting to bring out people's stories of pivots. And I've got a couple from people we've worked with over time, but we've also got some people that are going to talk about some of the pivots they've made in their business as learning pieces, really, of what you do right, what you do wrong, what they might do differently if they were to try to do a pivot again. So we're open here to, because we're all among friends. We've all been doing this for a little bit. Things that went right, things that went wrong, we learned from both, right? So hopefully you feel free to share in that way. I'm going to just start with a couple of elements of a successful pivot. And then we can maybe go into some stories of what people have done and what worked and what didn't work. And the first one for me is discontent with the status quo. You've got to decide that you are very unhappy with your current position. And that sounds stupid, but unless you're firmly convinced that this is a bad place to be and stay, you'll never because this takes a lot of energy and risk and time and your team's energy and money probably. You're not going to do it unless you are 100% convinced that you are in the wrong place where you sit right now. So that's number one. You got to be convinced that you're in the wrong place, and really literally have a burning platform. I'll just give you the evolution of that phrase, because people say it, but they may not know what it means. If you were on an oil platform in the middle of the Bering Sea and somebody says, hey, jump off the oil platform into the ocean, you'd go, what are you, nuts? I'm not jumping off the platform. But what if the platform was on fire? Well, you'd jump, right? And so that's the idea. The platform has to be on fire. The heat of staying where I am, the risk of staying where I am is so great that I've got to exit. And we've got to remember, people will do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. People will do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. So I can't talk just about how great it's going to be in the ocean once you jump in, because that's not enough. I'm pretty comfy up here on the platform. Unless I go, staying here will be painful, and going there, yeah, there'll be more pleasure, there'll be more positive, but unless there's a exiting from component to it, you're not going to get it to happen. And those are the elements of change, really, when you think about it, when you're trying to pivot, is build that burning platform and build that vision of what the future is going to look like if we do make the change. The vision, and I can tell you, I've done it before where I've made a vision that's like, wow, super amazing. Everybody wants to be there. It's going to be great for everybody. And if I don't light the platform on fire, I've struggled to get people to change. It's just inertia. People don't want to change. It's hard. People don't like to change. I remember one of my favorite lines from Wayne's World is when the producer says to Garth, we're going to make some changes, and the camera zooms in on Wayne's face and he goes, change, we fear change. And I think of that every time I talk about change in an organization, that is the gut reaction of everybody in your organization. They go, we fear change. And it's natural, right? So where we are is on fire. Where we're going is nirvana. And then you got to show the roadmap to get it. And that's your communication job as a leader. Now, having said that, I think you have to test before you make the leap. So you have to verify that where you're going to is actually going to be better. It's one thing to believe it, but I think as an article of faith, it's hard for If you look at people's decision-making styles, some people are more data-based as opposed to intuitive, and they're going to need a little data to support that decision to make the move. So if I can't show them some data that supports that move is positive and we think it's going to work, we have a high probability of it working, they're really going to resist, because the intuitive stuff that many of us are able to see things that people can't see, they're going to need the data to be convinced to move with you, okay? So test it to verify that nirvana is as good as it is. And then maybe just two last thoughts and we'll open up to some stories. One is burning the boats. So it's one thing to light the platform on fire and get people to change, but if you don't build resistance to returning back to the original state, that's what people will inevitably do. So they talk about burning the boats. This is the Viking technique. When we're going to go take over a new country, they would sail over in their wooden boats with thousands of Vikings. They would land, and then the captain or the leader would burn all the boats. He goes, all right, we're not going back. There's only one direction, which is to conquer this country. And so people became intensely motivated when they realized they had no choice, right? So in a couple of the stories you'll hear where they actually did literally burn the boats, but at a minimum, you need to put barriers in place to returning back to the old state, right? So structural barriers in place. And I'll talk about one real quick, and then I'll just wrap this up with a book. Let's say I want my sales force to start selling a new product, right? And I'm going to incentivize them. I'll double the commission on my new product because it's more profitable for me. I'm happy to have them sell it. But I don't change the commission on the original product, right? I go, this should all work. They're all smart people. They'll figure out they can make twice as much money selling the new product. They won't make as much money selling the old product. Game over. Everybody's a rational actor. Change is done. Where's my martini, right? And what will happen for those of you that have done it, because I've made this mistake, people will go back to what's comfortable. Yes, they make less money, and they'll keep selling the old product. It's crazy. It's irrational, but that is what they will do. And so what you have to do is, in that simple example, go back to the original product and say, the commission on that is now half or zero. You really want to be extreme. So that literally a salesperson says, I could either starve, I can't pay for my fancy Cadillac or whatever I like to drive, or I got to go sell the new product. I have no choices, really. And now you forced the move. It's a little bit heavy-handed, I'll admit, but if you don't put barriers like that to moving backwards, you'll see people backsliding, even though it's not rational, but it's comfortable, right? And just last thing is a book that sort of talks about many of these things. Oh, sorry, one other thought. Pardon me. In your organization, there you have a formal network, right? Of like, here's my organizational structure, but you also have an informal network. And the informal network actually controls change in your organization. And so when you're thinking about change, you need to figure out who are the critical people in the informal network and go bring them on sides. If you don't get the nodes, the high influencers, I guess in the modern sort of social media space, you'd call these influencers. These are the people that will influence the other people to think a certain way. They're the people go to, and it's not their boss. It's Sally in accounting, or it's Bob out on the loading dock because he seems to know what's going on, right? And so if you don't get them on sides, your change will fail. So I encourage you, when you're thinking about your communication plan around change, about burning platform, where are we going? Why are we going there? How are we going to get there? Why I think it's going to work. You got to go to Bob. You got to go to Sally. It's not the organizational structure. It's not send the email out and let it ripple. This is a little bit hand-to-hand combat, right? And I'm going to tell you, even in a company of 1,000 people, there's like 30, 40 people that control your information flows. And you got to figure out who they are and manage them, right? So that's worth thinking about when you consider, like I said, Debbie will tell you, when we do social media stuff, we look for influencers because we know these people exist in society. They exist in your company too. And if you can get an influencer to jump on board, it's like 10 to 1. They punch above their weight, right? They're influential, like it says. Just last thought, a book, if you wanted to read it, maybe two. It's a book called Managing Change by a guy named Warren Bennis out of University of Southern California, Managing Change. He talks about sort of the steps to take to implement change, more on the soft side, which is good. The other one that's good is Innovator's Dilemma. If you haven't read it, good book. Really, any change you take on is about where I am is comfy and I need to make a big shift. It is the innovator's dilemma. I'm going to destroy what I'm doing now in exchange for something else many times. So the book has a lot of guidance on how to handle that. Last idea, sorry. 3 areas for innovation: business model, talent, processes, and systems. The 3 points of leverage, the 3 points of constraint. Business model, talent, processes, and systems. Those are the places to look for innovation and pivots. So I think Stephen may be open to, he's got 2 stories actually. We'll break them up. We won't make you do them 2 in a row, but Stephen, why don't you, if you're game to open up and sort of share one of your sort of pivots you've made over time. And we worked with Stephen for a long time, been a friend of the project.
Yeah, sure.
What went right? What went wrong? What was the problem? What did you solve? How's it going? All that jazz.
Yeah, I actually, come to think of it, I actually have 5, but I won't bore. I mean, my company is 27 years old next month, so I've had 5 pivots, actually 5 significant ones. So I won't bore you with all of them. But I'll start with one, which I wasn't planning to talk about, but since you mentioned Innovator's Dilemma, we basically lived that about 3 years ago. We had all these legacy products that we were selling and doing really, really well selling them. And we had all these new products, right, which had a significantly longer runway and would result in much greater valuation for the company moving forward. But all of our salespeople were killing their quota selling the old stuff. And we did exactly what you said, just to the T.
Yeah.
Double their commissions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Guess what? The needle was barely moving.
Wow.
Salespeople were killing it on the old stuff. And same with development. Our development staff, I mean, because we were selling so much of the old stuff, and a lot of our stuff is customized for large customers, we didn't have time to dedicate to the new stuff to make that better. So we kept, I call it polishing the knob on the old stuff and made that better and better and better and better because all these deals were coming in and the new stuff wasn't moving. Long story short, because I can talk about this for 2 hours, the CEO that I brought in to run the company, he made a whole bunch of changes based on Innovator's Dilemma, and we took an extreme route. I mean, we didn't burn the boats, but we split the company in half, and we basically created, I won't bore you with our 3-letter acronyms: old stuff, new stuff, salespeople, development staff, professional services, quality assurance, support, down the middle. I mean, we kept a couple of organizations that served both masters, you know, marketing, HR, IT, finance, et cetera, et cetera. So we had a, common shared services area, but then the rest of the company was sold in half, was split in half. Guess what? We tripled the size of the new business within 2 years.
Wow.
I mean, salespeople weren't allowed to sell old stuff, and the new stuff salespeople weren't allowed to sell. I'm sorry, the old weren't allowed to sell the new, and the new salespeople weren't allowed to sell the old. And that right now is, I would say, after 3 years, the new stuff went from being 10% of our business to 70% of our business.
Wow.
So gut wrenching, super tough. A whole bunch of people are saying, what the hell, what's going on? Why am I in the old area? And by the way, the old continues to thrive. I mean, it's not growing, but it's doing well. And we've proven to the folks that felt that they were on the chopping block, that this division is going away, that that's not the case, because we're remaining steady there at around, I don't know, $10-12 million a year. But the new stuff is growing like hotcakes, which is great. So that was a really tough shift, and that's paying up dividends.
But you suppressed your profit for a couple of years while you had sort of 2 complete organizations, right?
Oh, totally. I mean, we definitely took a hit on the bottom line by doing this. But if we didn't do this, the new stuff would not have reached its full potential, and we wouldn't have the valuation that we have today, because our old stuff has a shelf life of maybe, I'd say, realistically 24 months, optimistically maybe 48.
Mm.
So the valuation is non-existent, because who would buy something that's going to go away in 2 years?
Yep. Cool.
So,
and questions, what would you do differently about that shift, Stephen? What did you do wrong? I guess, what did you do wrong, or what would you could have done better?
I probably would say this to all of my shifts. I would have done every shift that we've implemented should have been done earlier. A lot earlier, because these things are so tough. I mean, people are involved, your relationships are involved, perception is involved, and you agonize and you hem and you haw and you lose sleep over this type of stuff. And then when you finally pull the trigger and you see that it's working out swimmingly, you're like, damn, why did I lose even like an hour sleep over this? This is brilliant.
Yeah, that's fine.
So yeah, I second your recommendation on Innovator's Dilemma. Great book and great recommendations.
I think Sharon put a link up in the chat, and Mike had a comment about, it's like monkey bars. If you're swinging monkey bars, you got to let go of one before you can go to the next one, or you get stuck, right? So it's a good analogy to use. Anybody else have a shift or pivot that they've made it either successfully or unsuccessfully? I could share one if nobody else has one. Yeah, Debbie, please.
I have four more.
Let Debbie go. We'll get back to you, but
yeah, I'm kidding. I don't want to hog up their time.
In TV time, we got like Phil, like you're our filler, right? But Debbie, go ahead, please. I'd love to hear it.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Debbie Bates-Schrott, CEO of Beyond Definition, and we're a full-service marketing and brand agency right outside of DC. And the business is 17 years old, and we made a big shift last year just around this time. And I brought on a partner, Mark DeVito, who is our president and comes from a very different background than I do. Up until a couple of years before he joined us, we were mostly a creative services agency. And, did that very successfully for, 15 or so years. And I saw how, design and things that could be, now done by freelancers or pushed out overseas, the margins really shifting on that. So by bringing on Mark to the team, we really expanded our expertise in the offerings that we could provide. So we're focused now much more on research and strategy, brand strategy, marketing strategy, and we still do a lot of the design, but it's really founded on solid inputs before we move into the design phase. And for me, that was really how we were going to grow the business and really be more valuable from a standpoint of expertise versus something that can become much more automated or people seem to put less value on. So the shift for us was not only me making the decision to bring on a partner and, shift, have a split pathway in that way, but we really had to break down a lot of barriers from the 16 years of the old regime, the way we did everything. The work that we did was very formulaic and very process oriented and very schedule oriented and not real agile in our way of thinking and building strategies and doing research. So after about a year in, I had to really make a hard decision about someone who had been a part of the team for 14 of those 16 years, who could not make the shift, could not open up enough to see the broader scope of what we were doing. And, I'll align with what Stephen said. It should have been done earlier. There was a lot of damage that had to be undone by allowing it to go on as long as it did from a standpoint of staff morale and those kind of things. And I also agree with what Stephen said, that you have to find the people who have the voice within the organization. And what I learned from this process was that the person that I had to remove from the team had a very, very strong voice and a very negative voice, and was really holding us back from being able to make this shift and to bring all of the rest of the team along in a very positive momentum forward with this shift, because he was anti the change the whole way through. But he would tell us that the others were anti the change when it was really him fueling all of that. So that was a big shift, so that all happened at the end of last year. And since, the world got locked down with COVID-19 and everything else, I was never so happy to celebrate that we had made those changes and made that shift. And we weren't dealing with that negativity or those roadblocks ahead of us. So that's
so I think a lot of times these pivots are linked, right? There's a strategic change, which means a talent change. You know, which came first for you, the decision to be more consultative in the work you did as opposed to more sort of graphic designy? Or was it you found this guy, this partner of yours, and you go, oh my gosh, that could bring me to a whole different place? Which order did it come for you, Debbie? Or was it another order that I?
No, the strategic shift was first because we had been doing more and more of the brand strategy work, and that was coming to us. So we had partnered with my current partner's agency for about 3 years before he came on board with us. So we had had a working relationship, and we knew that what we could do by adding that depth of service would be a successful growth area.
Nice. Cool. So you to go back to trial, you guys sort of hung out together, worked together, and knew you liked each other and the cultures fit before you went and did something more significant.
Yes.
Nice. That's good.
Yeah.
You know, just on that change thing, we used to use a story of when we're doing a change process, we're going on a journey, and you know, hopefully everybody wants to go where we're going, right? But there'll be some people that want to go where we're going, but they just struggle, right? Talent, skills, knowledge, whatever. And then there's and we're going to work with those people. We're going to help our wounded, right? And there's other people that just don't want to go where we're going, but they're going to go with us anyway. And unfortunately, you have to get rid of those people like Debbie did. It boggles my mind when somebody would get on a train that's going to another city and they whine about the fact that the train's going to that city the whole time they're on the train. I'm like, why did you get on the train in the first place? But it happens, right? And you have to explain to them they're on the wrong damn train and they got to find another one.
Yeah. And I think for me, I mean, the shift was much harder than I anticipated it to be. And I guess that's, you know, a huge learning for me too, in that I'm a glass half full person normally, and I don't think something's going to be that difficult because I just keep on going like the Energizer Bunny, and I will make it happen.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was much harder than I thought.
Yeah. Yep. Worth it though.
Yes.
Who else has a story?
Great.
Switch. Pam's talking. Go ahead.
Book, which talks about it's called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. How to change things when change is hard, and it talks about how to motivate people to help themselves and get behind the change. It's great. So, Switch.
We actually had one of the Heath brothers speak at one of our conferences, our CEO summits, a few years back. I'll give you a little preview for some of the people on, and we may be talking more about that, but we'll be doing a virtual summit in the fall. And so what's the best way to say this? One of the speakers' names rhymes with Beth Snowden. For those of you that are marketing types. All right. Anybody else have a story?
I got a story.
Bob, oh yeah. Bob, you're like live shift. This is like your life, dude.
I feel like I've been doing this for way too long already. No, so I bought a magazine 5 years ago in the commercial food service equipment space to try to help control the voice of what was said about food service equipment. I used to be a manufacturer in the space, so I knew it pretty well. The magazine was at that time 20 years old. Now it's 25 years old. And as you guys know, the print ad business is probably the last business you should think about investing in. But about a year ago, much like Debbie said, we started shifting and pivoting toward becoming a digital ad agency, because really our job is to help our advertisers, which are manufacturers of food service equipment, sell more equipment. And then COVID hit, and it's like all of these in-person events that normally take place, food service equipment manufacturers, they're fairly global in nature. And so they're attending trade shows all over the world. And that's about where half of their lead gen comes from. So now these in-person events just dried up and went to zero overnight. And so I realized that I was going to have to do something pretty quick. So we decided to get in the virtual events business. And so that we could help our manufacturers generate new leads that they had lost due to in-person events, because the type of available software or virtual event companies out there, it was fairly boring. People don't buy food service equipment on webinars. They buy food service equipment in demonstration and trade show, virtual trade show booths and that kind of thing. And so we have, since March, I've had my entire development team from another company in the portfolio that does software for design, building out a platform that allows you to have a much more interactive event with showing food service equipment and helping manufacturers understand that they needed to pivot toward more video around how to market and sell the value propositions in their equipment. So I would give them the infrastructure to set up a really nice stand, but they still have to do the heavy lifting themselves on the videos and the interactivity, and have salespeople show up and chat and or video, live video to do demonstrations. And so I basically had to go back and tell my 120 advertisers how to rebuild their marketing materials to correspond with the virtual trade show software that we developed. And it has been extremely successful. I think that it's probably likely that we're going to spin this company out all by itself and start selling into other verticals. For example, the virtual event that you guys are going to have for Inc. CEO, we just showed him the platform of the person responsible for making this decision earlier this week. I think they already had a vendor in mind that they were a long ways down the road with. So I doubt that they're going to end up using our platform to deliver the Inc. CEO virtual event. But I would say if we had been in this business for 6 months longer, we would have landed this project too. The other things is that these other companies out there, they say, if you want to do an event with us, the first event that we're available to do one would be sometime in the second quarter of 2021. And by the way, it's $125,000 for something they used to charge 40 for. So it's this pivot, seems to be not only a great one for the company, but maybe a great new business too. I had to just, and I think the best way to pivot is to go back to your roots and figure out what's my real job. Well, my real job is to help these guys sell more equipment and find a way to help them do it. And that's what we've done. And that's, so far, it seems to really be working well.
Cool. It's pretty fundamental. Debbie, go ahead.
Can I get a demo of that?
We sold one.
Because we work with a lot of associations who are really struggling with how they're going to handle their big annual events. Then they're moving them all digitally. And a lot of them have very large exhibit halls where they are used to selling products and doing appointments and all that. So I'd love to see if there's something else that could be recommended in that way.
Sure, Debbie. I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay.
Hey, Bob, I'll be hitting you up as well.
All right. Look forward to it, Stephen. I'm going to charge you double though.
Charge Debbie half and charge Stephen double. That works out. All right. Anybody else? Yeah, Jade, please.
Yes. So we actually, along that line, this past week, we deployed virtual brand ambassadors for the first time. Super exciting. One of our programs, we've been producing a North American concert series. We did Garth Brooks and Blake Shelton, and we're getting ready to do another act here at the end of the month. And I own an experiential staffing company. So our space is large event staffing, PGA golf, basketball, football, all the things that aren't happening right now. We actually deployed virtual brand ambassadors on a virtual flyering campaign. So we hired about 25 of our folks that normally work with us. They became micro-influencers in markets that were struggling to sell concert tickets. And they started joining boards in those markets and posting creative assets for Instagram, Facebook, things like that. We had some crazy number of impressions, like 27 million impressions over these different posts and these different efforts over the course of a week. And tickets lifted about 8,000 units. So it was very, very successful. And it was really our first foray into saying, okay, we used to do this virtually, and in virtual brand ambassador work.
Very cool. And so and just what do you think the pivot was? Just the accepting that the world has changed and we got to have a different model here, and some of it worked, or?
So I think that the model used to be to get in front of large groups of people and touch as many of them as possible with some sort of creative asset, right? A promotional giveaway or a one sheet or something like that. Well, now we can't get in front of those people. So how do we get in front of groups virtually and give them something, right? It's not email. You can't get them on a call, right? So going into these micro groups, things like in Dallas, it might be a mom's group. It might be a travel group. It might be an entertainment group. You join that private group, right? So there's a process, right? Where they say, okay, this is someone who won't let into our group. And then once they're in, then they're able to start promoting things, kind of like the virtual, the magazine idea, right? You're coming in, you're saying, hey, I'm a part of you. And oh, by the way, I'm going to promote my client's service or product. So it's a little bit of a process, but now coming out of this, we have these micro influencers that we can go sell again. And that's the pivot, is thinking about, okay, we're building this network of people that we can now go and sell again and again for products or services that are aligned with what we did before.
And how do you engage those people? Sorry, I'm curious.
The staff?
The micro influencers, or are they staffers?
So we've got about 30,000 people across North America that were our employees. They still are our employees. We don't have anything for them to do, right? So we're reaching out to these guys that already are in the promotional experiential space. They're already plugged into a lot of these boards and they've got nothing to do. So we're saying, hey, we'll pay you, $40 for 10 posts. And they're going out and finding these things, and we're tracking them all on a form. So then we can see, okay, they reached the number of folks that subscribe to those boards or that are connected to those people. So the network already exists. And to grow that, it'll just be reaching out, posting, saying, hey, are you interested in music? What's your friend following? How many boards do you belong to?
Nice. Cool. Awesome. Very 2020 as a solution, I will say. Very 2020. Anybody else have a pivot they want to talk about? We've always got Steven. I'll give you maybe just one, and then we'll jump over to Steven. What do you think about the good one? This was a literal burn the boats one. There's a guy named Neil Rothermel who Bob knows. By the way, I'm looking at your picture, Bob, wondering when's the next time an event like that is ever going to happen again.
It's the first year I haven't been to Coachella in about 8 years. It's killing me.
Yeah, it could be another 8 years, buddy.
Yeah.
So a guy named Neil Rothermel, Neil had a business that he had started in the premium event space. And so he did high-end meetings for like pharmaceutical companies as sales incentive or executive retreats or so forth. And it was really the first business he got into. So they would organize the hotel and the signage and the speakers and the whole deal for an event. They were exceptional at it. They had a phenomenal motto, which was clairvoyant service. So they wanted to know the problem and have it solved before you realized that it was a problem. I mean, and if you know Neil, you could see that he could probably pull that off. He's like that kind of guy. He's so tuned in. But over time, other people, it's a very low barrier to entry business. So this is a business model shift, by the way, that elicited a talent shift. So he's a low margin business, low barriers to entry. And he used to make good margin at it, but over time the pharmaceuticals got compressed, so they started being price conscious. Other people entered, and he began to not basically get bid out all the time instead of just selling it to the marketing dudes who'll pay whatever they need to pay. And
so that's what RFP stands for. That was what he said.
Yeah, basically, right? Yeah, he'd never seen an RFP in his life until like this period, and of course, price went down, his ability to make money went down, non-recurring, low margin. It's got all the bad things around a business model that we don't like, or not all of them, but some of them. And so he had a burgeoning strategy business where they were doing biopharmaceutical promotions and strategy and education to help marketing organizations bring their product to market, mostly around patient education. So if you are diagnosed with diabetes, for example, you need to get taught how to inject yourself, how to measure your blood sugar, how to eat properly, how to exercise, all that stuff, what the measures mean. It's like not just take this pill, you'll be fixed. It's a thing, right? So they would go in and they would educate instead of a doctor, their people would do it, a nurse mostly. So that was an early business and it looked promising, had high margin, not a lot of competition, complicated to run, leverage a lot of the same skills of organization and so forth. So they literally, and it was about half and half. The strategy business making all the money, the meetings business basically break even or losing money. So he made the decision literally in one night, well, over a period, but one day he said, we're out of the meeting business. Told all the clients, we'll finish out the contracts we have, but don't bother sending us any RFQs anymore. We're done. You've priced us out of the market. You win. And funny enough, Lily goes, but wait. We love you guys. They go, well, and you'll hear that. Clients will say, you can't stop doing this. I love working with you guys. Now, of course, what's really going on is, you know, you're really cheap and really good. Of course, I love you guys. They don't care that you can't make any money and it doesn't have a future, right? So you will hear client pushback. So he shut down the business. About 100 people lost their jobs. Now they were all talented people. They found jobs other places, and he was very helpful in helping them find jobs. Gave them a decent severance, all the good things you can do, and had a smaller, tighter, much more profitable business, which since that time is more or less doubled. But an incredibly gutsy and difficult move. But when I talk about burning the boats, telling the clients not to send RFQs anymore and firing the people is about as burn the boat as you could possibly get in that move. I said he saved many of those people into the new business, but the only way the company was going to survive was for him to make that shift fairly suddenly versus the long, slow bleed of this one losing money and this one making money and trying to balance out those two pieces of business. So very, very tense moments for him as he went through that process of change, because he wasn't sure it was going to work, but it did, but he wasn't sure. So there's another business model. And so now what he has are longer term contracts. So it's got recurring revenue, higher margin. We like that. And ultimately a higher valuation if he's ever to sell this business, because the meeting business would never have sold for any money for all the reasons like Stephen was talking about. It's contract to contract and it's low margin. Like, why would I ever buy a business like that? So somebody else want to chime in with one? Positive, negative?
Jim,
Lynn,
yeah, years ago, I was with an IT distributor, and most of our business was centered around one particular manufacturer. And so we were heavily weighted and risk factor around that one, and realized we needed to move into other technologies. So we went after two separate technologies. One was cybersecurity. We went after the largest manufacturer and built a specific division around what their needs were. And then we went after another technology that was not going through distribution. They were selling direct to the channel. And we bought one of their largest channel partners and burned the boat. We turned it into a distributor overnight and started handing the partners the leads and became a distributor. And those entities still exist to this day. And that was, that was some 15 years ago. And had we not shifted and diversified, one of our largest entities was bought by Nortel, and we all know what happened to Nortel. So if we hadn't diversified, we wouldn't have existed going forward.
Wow. But the guts to buy a business and basically completely change the business model after you buy it is, the accountant's hair must have been on fire, right? They're like, you can't do that, right? We bought this for a reason. That was probably for me in that story, the gutsiest move in that whole thing is, we're going to go spend a bunch of money, buy a company, and trash the business model. It's amazing. Anybody else? All right, Stephen. Number 2 of 12. No.
Give him the big one.
Where do I begin? So I'll start with a book recommendation. Necessary Endings. Probably one of the top 10 best books business-wise that I've ever read. Huh. If you finish this book and you don't sever at least one relationship, probably 3, then you didn't get the point of it.
Yikes.
So really good book. And I guess I'll title this based on a comment that we got from Pam. You'll remember this from one of the people in our group. Partners are for loving and dancing.
Nah.
No. So, I mean, I hear the story all the time from entrepreneurs and CEOs, so I'll share it. I mean, I had a partner in the business for many, many, many years. We were best friends. This guy was the godfather of my first daughter. That's how close we were. And then long story short, we ended up, being co-CEOs as the company, continued. We had, different titles and responsibilities, but we ended up being co-CEOs starting at around 2008 and going on. Long story short, when we were smaller, it was easier. We have, very, very different personalities we have different philosophies. Sorry. It started really, really, really getting contentious, and the relationship was really inhibiting the company's growth, and it was just inhibiting productivity because we were at each other's throats continuously. We were at an all-company meeting in New Orleans one year, and we were asking for questions from the audience, and they had to write it down and send it to the front. So I'm reading one of these questions is, when is Stevens and Henry's cage fight coming up on the agenda? I mean, that's how obvious the friction between the two of us was within the company. And it got to the point where I knew that one of us needed to leave. And obviously, I wanted it to be him, but I needed the valuation to be fair enough to prove that the valuation I was offering was fair. I was 100%, willing to take the deal. So I had the lawyers draft up the entire, sell agreement. And basically at the very, very top, I'm like, one of us is going to be the buyer. One of us is going to be the seller. Starting tomorrow, with this company will not be owned nor run by both of us. So that's how I knew the valuation. That's how I convinced him that the valuation was fair. And I was 100% sincere. I was going to take the deal because that's how, bad it got. And I was going to, find something else to do because I thought the money was really, really fair. Big, bold move because, him and I owned some of our biggest relationships, specifically with Microsoft, who at the time we had a serious customer concentration problem. Microsoft was like 60% of our business at the time. And both of us, owned that relationship. We owned a couple of other, big relationships with some of our, business partners. And from an employee perspective, I mean, for all of the angst and anxiety that he caused me, he did have really, really good relationships internally. So there was a fear that how that was going to be perceived internally, how our biggest customer was going to take it, how other suppliers and partners were going to take it. But at the end of the day, I got nothing but congratulations. Congratulations from Microsoft saying, I had no, when you guys came over, he confused the hell out of us. I don't know. So now it's good. The relationship will go a lot smoother because he's not there. Employees were congratulating me up one side, down the other. And I started sleeping at night again. So it's super, super tough. And I hear about the same exact scenario from so many CEOs and entrepreneurs that partnerships just don't work out at scale. And I'm not saying it's 100% of the time, but I'm a firm believer that, for every co-CEO or partner relationship that works out, there's at least, 10x, if not 20x that are, problem-filled, contentious, and prevent you from the organization reaching its full potential. It's just maybe it's just me, but I'm thinking that I'm not the only one.
Stephen, that change enabled you to make a lot of future enhancements to the business model, the team. Everything flowed after you made that one decision.
Everything did continue to flow. I mean, the biggest, I won't bore everybody with all the details here, but the biggest one after that came was that I ended up, bringing in a CEO to run the company. And that was another, huge change to basically hand over the keys to my baby to run the place. I mean, I got incredibly lucky. I think this is 10 times easier said than done. You have, so much blood, sweat, and tears, built into your organizations, to hand that over to a stranger is super, super tough. I hired him as a CEO as a test. I hired him as a COO first. And I thought the test was going to be a year. It took me 3 months to know that, this is the guy. I don't need to wait. And that's one of the decisions that I didn't take too long on. I thought I was going to give him a year to see if I would trust him with the keys to the castle. And after 3 months, I'm like, this is the right guy. and to make it totally clear to the organization that I wasn't repeating a co-CEO or, partnership type arrangement with the new guy, I basically disappeared. I mean, obviously I was in touch with him continuously, but the company did not see or hear from me for a year because I wanted them to completely understand who was in charge. I promoted myself to executive chairman, and I went to do Ironmans around the world. And I did 4 Ironman races that year, just so it can give him the freedom to run the company the way he saw fit. And it worked out swimmingly. Nice. And it continues to. So I've come back now. So I have some responsibilities within the company, but for all intents and purposes, he runs the show all day, every day. And that worked out great.
Nice. I will say this partnership thing is a theme. We run into it all the time in our CEO peer groups when we're working with people. And excuse me. The one thing I'll tell you is when you form your organization, you need to have a buyout agreement in the deal day one. So Stephen came up with a creative and appropriate way to solve it. Like, either I'll accept this as a seller or I'll accept it as a buyer. I don't care. That's a great place to be. It's the ambivalence point that you can get to. But ideally, you have a structured way to say, look, if either of us decide that this is not what we want to do, the other has the right to buy that partner out at some number, 5 times EBITDA, 6 times EBITDA. It's probably not full market, but it allows you to exit reasonably elegantly with no brain damage, and we're done. There's no negotiation on the price. There's no conversation, is it fair or not? It's the number. We agreed it. It's done. I'm not saying somebody wouldn't renegotiate it, but you need to have an exit. It's a prenup, right? You need the prenup written when you get married, because, as Stephen said, the statistical probability is you're not going to be married forever in a business partnership for a whole bunch of reasons. And I'll tell you, just it's not the worst story in the world, but I literally just helped selling a financial services company for a lot of money. It was over $70 million because the 2 partners couldn't get along. It was a massively successful company. They were doing incredibly well, and they were just like oil and water for a whole bunch of reasons. There was no breakup clause in their organizational agreement. So it was going to get super litigious, and they got, you know what, instead of that, so they sold it to a third party, and they're out. So actually one may stay with, the other's probably out. But that's because they didn't have a clause. It would have been nicer if they had said, listen, I can't take it anymore. All right, 5 times X, we're done. And that would have been an easy way to solve it, or 6 times, whatever the number is, would have been elegant. So I can tell you, whenever I build partnership agreements now, I always put exit clauses in place, just to avoid there's a lot of negative energy at the end. It's very hard to have a civil negotiation, right? So,
one side note on the book, Necessary Endings, after you read it and you love it and you want your significant other to read it, just be careful of the way you deliver it. Just a little advice.
Nice.
Or you could just graduate to the shirt right away and just bypass the partnership. Jim's got a special shirt for everybody that does that.
Yeah. We bought Bob a shirt that says, I'm B. Walt and I'm 100% in control. So sort of after the profit. Anybody else have a shift that's relevant and worth sharing? And like I said, even screw ups are good too. No? You can call it a little early if we don't have anything.
There's just one other thing. When we talk a lot about navigating change with the organization, I was taught the 70-20-10 rule. So 70% of your organization is typically fence sitters, 20% can be those influencers you have to find, and 10% will be the naysayers. Of that 10%, 2% are really negative. And if you can find them and help them be successful elsewhere, your chance of change successfully is much greater.
Yeah, somebody coined the phrase "death march troublemakers." Those are the ones you want to help find success elsewhere.
Lynn is so corporate. She goes, I'm going to help you find success in another organization. Which everybody else says, listen, you're done. That's funny.
Probably the Canadian in me.
Yeah, he's right. You're being very nice. Hey, yeah. No, I've used the phrase. It's a good phrase. Anything else? Anybody else? Robert? No? Are you just moving your hand, Bob? Oh, you talking? I can't hear you. No.
You're on mute, Bob.
No,
I
was
saw
just-
that.
There we go.
I was
The need to
stretching.
change versus the desire to change. I mean, our company's been around forever.
Yeah.
You could make a good case that, why bother? Why
Yeah.
mess everything up? And I'm a mess everything up kind of guy. I mean, it's like, uh-oh, here comes Bob. And most of the time it works out, but a lot of the time there's, kind of blanket resistance. Like, why do you want to mess everything up now?
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer that change or die.
Yeah.
Flatlining is a death knell for business.
Mm.
So it's more of a desire to change than a necessity.
Interesting.
We're growing, we make money, everybody's fat and happy.
Mm.
And I don't like it. Well, it's, I don't know if I'm ready to burn the boats, but close.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you probably have to be careful about change for change's sake, but if you got a reason, which I'm sure you, thank you, Ezra, bye. If you got a reason and you can explain it, you should be able to bring people in. I do also think there's always an interesting dyad of I'm going to call you a crap stirrer, right? And an organizer, right? And so there's always somebody doing this, and there's somebody on the other side. In many relationships, business relationships, there's somebody on the other side going, all right, that one makes sense. That one, hey, Bob, we're not doing that. That one, oh, that's a really good idea. All right, we're going to do that. And they sort of organize your creativity and turn it into something the organization can digest and execute. So it may be that you need a buddy or a partner in the effort that can interpret what you're doing and translate it into the organization for you. Not every idea, because they're not all good, right? I mean, but the good ones for sure. I don't know, just a thought, random thought. But all right. Good stuff. Thank you, everybody, for joining on a hot August, well, almost August, July day. And we will see you next week on Java. Hope you got a few ideas, and thanks for sharing. Everybody was really generous with their time. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. It's a safe space. It's a safe space.
Thank you.
Everybody.
See y'all later.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.